I wrote my new book, Why Gather? The Hope and Promise of the Church, initially as a way of saving the church. Now that might sound like a really outrageous statement, so I'm just gonna give a little bit of context here. In my entire life, and certainly in my entire life as a leader in the church, I have been part of an institution that has been in decline. Now, I've had the privilege of being able to serve in congregations where there is real flourishing, but overall the institution has been in decline for my entire experience of it. And so what happens in that kind of context is that there is enormous pressure on church leaders to try to save the church. And I thought that if I just wrote a book that very clearly articulated why we believe the things that we believe, that would be so compelling that everyone would want to be part of our church. A couple of things interrupted that plan and led me to the writing of the actual book that I ended up with. The first thing that interrupted that plan was that I was actually pretty close to burnout at that time. And the pressure that I was feeling of trying to save the church was a pressure that I wasn't managing quite as well as I thought that I was. The other thing that interrupted that plan was a little thing called a global pandemic that completely shut down not just the normal patterns of being the church that we were all so used to, but basically all of our normal patterns of living. Those two pieces, the struggles that I was facing personally and the questions that we all started asking in the midst of this pandemic, helped me to get a lot more clear about who the church is and why the church matters. And what I found is that when I started really delving into those core questions, what I was left with was a lot of stories about how God was at work in real flesh and blood, messy lives. And that was incredibly liberating for me because it's already happening. It's not something that I have to make happen. It's not something that we have to make happen. And the other reality that it points to is that actually, like, Jesus never commissioned us to go and save the institutional church. What Jesus did invite us to do was to look again and see how God is already at work in our lives. Repent, turn around, because the kingdom of heaven is drawing near. Look again, because it's already happening. My hope for readers of this book is that you will see described on the pages of this book the living, breathing reality of what it is to be the church right here and right now in this time and place. My hope is that you'll experience a lot of honesty in that about some of the struggles that we face in terms of institutional decline and questions about our place in the world. I hope that in finding these stories of God at work in real flesh and blood, messy lives, that all of us will have some tools to be more attentive to how God is at work in our lives as well. And I hope that in that starting place of these stories, of these questions, that we can be empowered as a church in terms of what we have to offer, not just the mess of our own lives, but the messy, broken life of the world.